I remember you telling yesterday that you worked on this film for quite a while before you actually decided to come up with this poem. So your thoughts about that?
Is it on? Yeah. Actually, you've partly answered the question yourself, but I can just share with you a little bit of my thoughts, my sort of the process that I went through. You're right. I mean, I did try to work on the film earlier, and I actually abandoned the project. I mean, I gave it up because, well, in short, the main issue for me has been the issue of predictability. So, as a filmmaker, as a film editor, as a film viewer, there's a way in which you see so many films, and they're often around issues. And there was a very strong sense I kept getting while working on this idea that there would be a sense in which someone would come to see a film, knowing briefly, let's say that it's about gender, space, something like that, and perhaps unknown to themselves have some expectations, which if one sort of excavates that subliminal, then that expectation is possibly an interview in which a woman would say how terrible things are. Possibly an interview with somebody else who would say how not so terrible things are. And the in-between and the grey and the little bit in the home and little bit in the street and, a lot of that. And somehow, there was this feeling that you would see the film and sort of, if the film was sort of well made, you would be able to have a sense of closure and say, okay, that was good, nice, somebody's made a nice film, and you sort of close it for yourself and you walk out, So I was actually extremely bored with the idea of doing something like that, and it seemed unimportant then, actually. So that's how one kept looking to see how and how to really prevent that closure, So for me, it was broadly that I was just looking at, I started to search for women whose work took them into the public domain all the time. And so I found, lots of women, of course, and then I sort of zeroed in on this group of people women who were learning to drive. And then there is this woman, Komita, who you see in the film, who's actually doing these enactments on the streets of Delhi, or call them interventions. So really it was trying to see how these two threads, or let's say two notes, like notes of music, let's say, so how these two would interplay with each other. So something like that, yeah.
The other question actually I had was, these two stories, like you said, you've chosen to intervene, both speak to a certain class of women. It's almost low, middle, working class. And what, I'm sure it was a conscious decision, but what was behind that choice? And, this versus juxtaposing it with, a woman of different class, So while I identified with Komita and said, okay, we all go through this, but there was also an awareness that sometimes class can be a shield, the way you carry yourself, or, maybe if people see you out your work equipment, whether it's a diary or a camera or something, there's a shield, and it makes a difference. So, but you've told a story of a certain class, so what was behind that?
I mean, firstly, I don't know if it relates only to a particular class. I mean, I think it's, of course it depicts these women who are sort of somewhere between working class and lower middle class, actually. But I can just share with you the trajectory. I mean, I think it's also that it is the sense of, the notebook or the cell phone or the shield, whether it's even a car or a restaurant, is, as soon as you examine it, even a little, it's actually a very fragile protective shield. So it becomes, for me, the idea of, the idea of not, firstly, I think that if you take different social strata in a film like this, in exploring gender and space, it also can become a listing of different experiences. And in fact, I was doing exactly the opposite, which was trying to, in fact, be as sort of micro as possible in my canvas in order to most possibly relate to more people. Secondly, I think it was that, then one would have to engage with that set of issues of actually showing how fragile these spaces are, whether it's the space of a cafe coffee day or outside or the mall or the car, which is the common upper class experience. And it seemed to me not my main concern at that point, because it seemed to me that if I can do this, then people from any class could possibly relate, because everybody is equally vulnerable. I mean, nobody can stand on the road and to me, of course, the whole idea is that it's all symptomatic of much, much larger violence in our society. So I had just put my little camera there, and I was filming for many, many days. And not only days, I mean hours, but days. And the idea being that it was just coming out of this, because I felt almost stupid at one point, because I felt anywhere I look, I actually see things that have been normalized but are completely sexist and completely gendered urban spaces. But the normalization is so complete that you almost don't see it. So it was with that intention that I put it there. So if you're referring to those, yeah.
That also, but also, and more spectacularly, that car reversing when that girl standing at the pavement at night. I mean, I guess any woman standing alone there, that's bound to happen within an hour or something, no? Maybe less.
Yeah, in fact, it happened in 10 minutes. It was 9 o'clock at night, and it wasn't winter, it was summer. And Komita, actually, the person who's in the film, is she's a lecturer. She teaches at Lady Irwin College journalism, but she is also an actor. She works with the Jan Natya Manch, and she's actually really an activist in her own field. So when she sort of came into this project, it was completely participatory, as I was telling you earlier. So I had a set of ideas about how to do these interventions, and then she, of course, she turned them on their head, and she had a whole lot of other ideas. So this was actually a road very close to where she used to live. And she said, just come with me, just 5 minutes, you'll see it happen.
Hi. Very often when I was watching the film, I got a sense of just being there, you know, in a very visceral fashion. I just wanted to know if you could talk a little about how you use the camera. Like, for example, there's a scene where people are coming out of an escalator, or there are women who are just walking towards the camera. Did they know the camera was there, or how did it happen?
Yeah, that is actually outside the metro station in Chandni Chowk, the one that you're referring to. We were just there. I mean, there was nothing. They were just coming out, and our camera was positioned there. I think it's also what happens is that if you're in any space for long enough, you become invisible, you know, especially when there's a camera. People get bored with it after a while. So I think that's what was happening in that particular scene that you talk about. And, you know, people are preoccupied with their own work, so they're just sort of moving like that, yeah. But it's true that in a lot of the other parts of the film also, this is very conscious that the way the camera has been done, the camera work, it's not making its presence felt, you know, too much. To the extent that somebody said about this film that this film doesn't have a camera in it. It was an interesting comment for me. It came from somebody who was not a filmmaker, and who said that it's strange. Is film में camera नहीं है? I mean, this person spoke in Hindi. So. The latest screening that the film had was at a college in Delhi, Zakir Hussain College, which is a co-ed college. And there was actually quite a polarization. I mean, firstly, of course, the film got over and it was very similar to what you're saying, because people had a lot to say. In fact, it was really quite, Komita was there, which was really nice also. And it was sort of a, you know, bang in the middle of lunch. And the kids were hungry, and I thought they'll all run away, but everybody stayed till 3:30 because they had so much to talk. And so there was a lot of response to the film, and there was a lot of recounting of personal experiences that happened. And interestingly and sadly, there was a complete polarization of the girls and the boys, because not vis-a-vis the film as such, but even in terms of recounting real life experiences, and it was quite, actually in a way very healthy, because there was a lot that came out, which some of their teachers later said that we need more forums like this where we can talk, and maybe other people can come and show films and that sort of thing, because it even escalated into a debate about reservation, believe it or not. Because, they were talking, we started with talking about reservations in buses and trains and so on, and then of course it got into the larger issue of reservation. So it was interesting, but yeah, it's had a lot of different responses in many audiences, and in an international audience, it was again quite interesting for me to see how people saw their own experiences mirrored. The good thing was, for me, I should say, that nobody said to me that, oh, how terrible things are in your city. There was never that. It was more that people spoke of their own experiences in their own cultures, because everyone seemed to resonate with it. Yeah.
I wanted to say that, like in Paris, right? I've heard that you pay differently at a restaurant depending on if you're sitting inside or if you're sitting outside. So the interaction of people is always there wherever you are in every city. It's just that the nature of it is different, and the cultural background of it is kind of different. So these kind of things will always exist in public environment.
Yeah, that's very similar to what people said to me. For instance, the film had gone to Yamagata, so there in Japan, it's not like a woman can't eat on a roadside eatery alone. In fact, much later at night than 9 o'clock, which is where Komita was there. So it was not about that, but it was more about finding other patterns and detecting them and seeing them and making them visible, sort of, and not allowing them to be just normalized in that way. Yeah.
I really enjoyed the film, but there was something that is really intriguing to me about the film, which is the interplay between the horror that converts itself into automatic beauty. For instance, like the character, this girl who's like standing around and she's floating around, and she's the one who's also carrying this some kind of surveillance camera. So you're always kind of troubled that she's going to be under attack or she's going to be under gazed or whatever. But immediately, like, her fragile floatiness within the city is the creation of beauty. So even the camera, which is always assumed as a surveillance camera, the one that's a threat that you're always gazed upon, but on her converts itself into absolute beauty, where it's looking at textures and motifs and bodies interacting with each other, like almost like Degas paintings or something. So there's this interplay between the horror converting immediately into its beauty, which is something that we've been in conversation with as well. But I find that really intriguing about the film. So it's not so much about, like, the character of the girl who's driving, which is, posed as something masculine, but immediately converts itself into something feminine with the nail polish or whatever is being touched upon. So I find that really, really intriguing. Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I would not have used these words, but I can see what you're saying, and it's actually, to tell you the truth, it was not something I was aware of. I became aware of it while I was editing, because the whole idea of having this little pen camera on her was actually not, because we knew that it's not like it's going to actually capture some image that will mean something in terms of action. The idea was it may be the edge of the road or the tree or something. And it was, in fact, other people later in some screenings said some things which made me also fully realize that it was also becoming a bit representative of her gaze, of her, this camera. And that, is something that actually I really only realized in the editing, that this was happening. I had no idea that, all that, as you're saying, that beauty of her dupatta, or the, the way just the edge of the tree, or, the road. Yeah.
So you shot this across multiple days, and most of it in the film that we see is negative traits wherein the woman is gazed upon by multiple men. So as a scientist, I'm not an artist. As a scientist, I am curious, like, was there any positive traits at all wherein how much editing did happen? Like say among 100 people, were all the 100 men actually looking at her, or was there like 20% or 5%, or what is the percentage?
No, but those percentages you see, because there are no closed shots of men looking. So when you see a frame, like for example in the pawn shop, actually you see the two guys behind the counter are looking at her. I mean, if we are talking of percentages, then the two people behind the counter are looking at her, and out of all the other guys hanging around, only two on the side are looking. But if you're asking about a larger question of the editing, then no. In fact, a lot of more looking has been edited out. I thought that the couple at the train was very beautiful. I thought that was very nice, and I wanted to keep that in the film, the girl who's going off in the train, and I thought that was really nice. Yeah.
Thank you.
I just had a quick question, because there are so many different trajectories in the film. For example, the whole self-defense school scenes, and like you mentioned, the boy and the girl, the train, and you see Mahila written on it. I just wanted to know, how did you think, or did it all come together in the editing? Were these forays planned? A little more about the process of wanting to go to the school, for example. How did it fit into the larger scheme of things?
Yeah, it was all part of my research, And like I was saying, these scripts I was dreaming up in my head. So it was really, I spent quite some time on the research. So, but in this film I was also acutely aware that I didn't want to put my research directly into the film. You know what I mean. I mean, there is a way in which you can, in documentary, give evidence of that research in the film. And I didn't want to do that at all, but rather to mutate it and transform it into an experienced reality, So, definitely looking at the fact of how do you defend it, how do you exist then in a scenario where even just standing on the road is a problem. Finally, what are the means? And I'm not able to, for apparent reasons, I'm not able to feel comfortable with the idea of self-defense. But I see that this is one of the movements, so I must represent it, and so on. Yeah, so it was quite a long period actually of work, and which is where all these trajectories were planned out to the extent that I must touch upon them, or I must gather these strands in the course of my work. And we filmed over a long period of time, intermittently, and I was very lucky to have a very good crew who were, very involved with the idea. So all of that really, yeah.
Were you expecting the kind of reactions, like there were some shots wherein we were expecting, okay, this person will come back now, and then stab back, and there were some expected reactions. So did you edit that out, or like how did you manage with that complete process of like you expected reactions and unexpected? How many part of it were expected? Like this person is supposed to react this way, and very fortunate enough to get some of the reactions which you actually wanted.
Actually it was not fortune or luck. It was just that the reality was playing itself out. It was a reality that one had observed. I have observed it from my childhood. I knew it would happen, So it was not luck. And it was just the fact that, that, the sun rises. So it's not lucky that you got the sunrise. So it was really, and I mean, I know this sounds terrible, but it was really like that. I know that they are going to look at her. If she goes to a place looking the way she does, looking simple, I know that if she went with her hair all wild and, with a short skirt, also they would look. I know that if she was in a sari, also they would look. All these arguments also, that a woman dressed like this, or a young woman, or an old woman, it's totally, I mean, you can just forget about it. You just have to be female. That's it. And, no, unfortunately, no disappointments.
Since everybody's since we're actually talking about the gays and what happened, I'm very curious to hear about the other story, that of the women drivers, because to me that is in a way somewhat of a contrast where it's a sign of hope that the women have claimed and their language shows their confidence in the way they claim. Do you want to speak a bit about it, about how you chose that story?
Yeah, I mean, I got to know them, like I told you, I was looking for people, women to be who would be necessarily in a public space, and I went and I met these people at the NGO and I explained my project. Took a long time for them to sort of agree and to understand that I was not looking, this film was not looking at personal and private stories. This film was not looking to get inside homes and do little private stories that nobody would want to sort of talk about. So, but finally I worked with them. I just found that the whole, the sort of really the symbolism of the fact of them moving in this vehicle and negotiating the public spaces and male domains all the time was just something that was so helpful for the narrative, for the story I wanted to tell. So in that sense it was very nice, and as you can see they're also so extremely spirited and so wonderful that this film I can't imagine this film without them, yeah. I mean, there's a lot to talk. They're going through their own trajectories and, all that, but.
The male dominance also exists in officers, but none of that was in the movie. So I was wondering, did you consciously leave that out, or?
Yeah, it was totally conscious, because yes, one could have looked at, gendered workspaces. One could have looked at gendering inside homes. I mean, there is so much there. But it was a process of paring down for me and to see which is that area that I can look at, which for me, at least at that phase in my work, which can in a way represent or be symptomatic of the rest. And otherwise it, like I said, it can become a listing of things, So for instance, if you read about architecture, then the gendered architecture, I mean the way such beautiful work has been done around that, where you see that, every built structure actually can be analyzed and seen to be sort of considered normal. And the fact that again, that normalization, and actually the spaces are racist, sexist, they're just completely gendered, especially in many ways. So if you actually start looking at that, you see that the huge problem is that the normalization creates a situation where the issue is never raised. And because the issue is never raised and it is all considered to be normal, the problem is never going to get sorted out. So, so even looking at architecture, looking at feminist geography, there was just so much there that one could have. So maybe it was this sort of flood of insights and information coming from everywhere that made me even more try to be small and pare it down. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll wrap up. Thank you so much, Sameera. Thank you.